and we're ready to go. Hey,
All
I'm
right.
Michael Dorinda,
And I'm Jake Bennett.
and welcome to episode 69 of the North Meets South web podcast.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We are going to be talking a little bit about our never ending app that's eventually going to happen someday. Then Ping Me. We like the name, we like the code, we just can't release the thing.
Yeah.
So, that's what we're talking about today a little bit. We're going to talk about that. We are going to talk about what was the other thing I wanted to talk about? Minio. Oh my gosh, I love Minio. Maybe some DFS namespace stuff up in here. What else?
A wonderful sponsor, Fathom Analytics.
SFTPs, SFTP drivers, enums, constants. Fun stuff. Okay, so let's jump into it. So let's start with real quick. What's going on? Actually, you know what? We don't do the personal stuff. We don't need to do the personal stuff. We always do the personal stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just going to suffice it to say, okay, here's what I will say real quick, real fast. Graham had a basketball game today. This is relevant because you like basketball.
Nice. Continue. Proceed.
And I have to say this because I'm a proud dad, but also because it's true. He's the best player on the team. I'm pretty stoked. It's been awesome. Now, to be fair, it's a second and third grade team, right? Yeah. To be fair. And also to be fair, I'm pretty sure like 9 of the 11 kids on the team all know each other from the same elementary school, and none of them have ever played basketball before. And so they all just decided to sign up together. So we were working on dribbling skills, right? Yeah. That's what we were, and that's okay though, because it's like that type of league, right? Where it's just very, very recreational, like not competitive, whatever. They don't keep score, right? That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yet they don't keep score yet. But Graham scored 16 points today in his game. I was pretty stoked. It was awesome. So I get to coach his team, and it was really fun. He's getting aggressive. There was a really big kid on the other team today who was like who was elbowing him, and he gave it back. It was a little bit as like a coach and also as his dad, it's like a little bit hard to watch, but you just got to let them fight their own fights kind of thing. Yeah. So
yeah, nice.
It was fun though. It was really fun. That's all. And then my wife's birthday was today. Happy birthday, Laura. I love you.
Happy birthday to you.
To you. Happy birthday to you. Okay. Anyway, moving on. Anything going on in your life you want to tell us about real quick?
Matt Stauffer put this blog post out about his streaming thing. And so for those of you watching the live stream, you can see I'm beautifully lit. I've got this LED strip
that is,
here behind
beautifully
me.
Lit.
I've got the Elgato Stream Deck to, press buttons while we're doing this.
Just love the toys.
I love the toys. And I sat here last night and I was gonna do some streaming on Then Ping Me because I was doing some work, and because I haven't worked on it since just before Christmas. You know how NPM is, and I tried to run NPM and it just didn't work, and so I spent like an hour on that, and then by the time I got everything back to where I wanted it to be, it was time for me to go to bed, and I figured it was not worth it. And I want to get your thoughts on this.
Yes, let's hear it.
In terms of live streaming and sharing what we're working on is cool, but how much of the secret sauce do we want to give away in terms of the project?
I don't know. This is sort of like, interesting ground, right? Because there are a lot of competitors, as it were, quote unquote competitors. But I think about about Nova, like Laravel Nova, and it's just, there's the source code. Here you go. Yeah. Ta-da. Like, everybody, here it is, right? And I feel like it's less about like there's nothing that we're doing that somebody else couldn't do, but we have had to come up with some novel solutions around some of the problems that we faced, right? Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. It's interesting. The service itself is the reason that people would get it is because it solves the problem for them conveniently, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be people who would want to do it themselves, and that's fine. They're not our customer. So I wouldn't worry too much about it, to be honest. I think that maybe the value you get out of live streaming it is a couple things. Number one, you're more motivated to do it.
Yeah.
Number two, when you're live streaming or pairing, like you stay more focused, right? I feel like you're able to get more done in a shorter period of time because you're accountable to the people who are watching or streaming with you. And then number three, it's also good for promotional purposes, right? So people know what's being worked on. They can kind of, it builds a little bit of tiny bit of hype around it. so that when it's released, it's not like, oh, what is this again? It's like you've been live streaming for the last however long. Yeah, no. So I think for me, like the upsides like outweigh the downsides, but I could be wrong.
I was definitely considering doing it. Like I had no issues doing it with the Laravel app or the package that you install into your Laravel app to get that up and running, because that code is going to be visible. You're just going to see that. It's just going to be there. It'll give you some indication around the kind of payloads that we send through to the SaaS. But in terms of how we handle it and what we're doing with it behind the scenes, there's not too much there in the end. And like you just get to see me flailing around and realizing that I don't do a lot of programming anymore. And so,
dude, isn't it sad?
Getting a bit less. It's a bit funny. I was actually talking to our chief operations officer today, and there are some plans in the sort of later part of this year to maybe get me writing some more code again, which would be nice. There's a few things that have to fall into place for that to work, but I'm looking forward to the possibility. My interest was certainly piqued. Just the ability to be able to, to work. So, it'd be good. Yeah. I do like coding, and like when I get home, I get home and then Eli gets home shortly after, and then it's sort of, family time until he goes to sleep.
Right.
And depending on how my day went, I'll either hit the gym, go for a walk, or just hang out with Ree for a bit. And then by the time I start anything, it's kind of like 8, 9 o'clock at night. And
for sure. Yep.
And it's like, I should probably go to bed, because then I have to get up again at 6 in the morning and, do it all again. And the weekends are tricky as well, because, we go out in the morning, we go shopping and grocery shopping and things like that. And then we come back and Eli could sleep for 2 hours or 3 hours, or he could sleep for half an hour. And it's hard to really plan anything, and by the time you get into a groove, I got to detach and go back and work on it. So I don't know. It's hard.
It's tough,
definitely
man.
Want to get it done, though, especially now. Like we're running multiple applications across multiple servers in HA, and it's getting to the point where we kind of really need the thing. And we actually had a conversation. I had a conversation with our one of our enterprise systems guys last or 2 weeks ago now, and we're talking about monitoring specifically and what we're using and what we're monitoring and what we're not monitoring and how we're monitoring it and things like that. So it'll be good to have something in place to monitor these applications specifically, because there are times when, commands don't run. That's the whole point of us building this app, is to monitor those situations. So yeah, I definitely want to get onto it. I just need to, I think maybe live streaming is the way, but I also live stream to an echo chamber because the time zone thing. So
yeah, so like 8, 9 o'clock your time is like what my time, and that should be So you're 8, 9 o'clock in the evening. It's like it's like the end of the workday, right? For us.
So it's right at 8, 9, but it's it's kind of
actually I guess it's the middle. It's right after lunch. It's like 2:30, 3 o'clock.
If I start at that's not that late. If I start at 10 o'clock at night, that's probably like 6, 7 a.m. 6 a.m. Central, 7 Eastern. So I'd have to do it earlier in the day.
Hold on. We're 14 and a half hours.
16 and a half at the moment, because you're not on daylight savings and I'm on daylight savings.
Okay, so if you started at...
So right now it's 3:30 p.m. on Sunday, and it is what? Like I would have to do it around this
11
time.
O'clock here.
Yeah, it's 11 o'clock there. So I would have to do it at this time, but I can't do it on the weekends at this time because Eli's around. This is an exception. This recording time is very special to us, and so we make time for it. And during the week, I'm at work, so it doesn't really work out there either, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah. Bummer, dude.
So I want to do it, but at the same time, like, who am I actually going to program to?
Well, you might be surprised. You might find an audience.
With some of those people on the West Coast.
For sure. Yeah. No, I would say try it, man. Try it and see how it feels. See what you think about it. And I mean, the thing is, you already got all the equipment, right? So you might as well just try it. Start it out.
Yes, I have.
If you're not going to use it, yeah, you do. You have all the toys now. So I'm sure Reese sees these boxes come in and is just like, Michael, what did you buy now? Yeah, well, I needed the lights, and then I needed this.
Yeah, as soon as he got that blog post out, she tweeted at him and just said, "Matt, no, the money's gone already."
That's hilarious. He already ordered it. It's gone.
Yeah,
that's funny. Yeah, man. I'm gonna turn this mic back a little bit this way because I feel like
there you go.
It's barely picking up anything.
Justin Jackson will watch me program. He's on the west coast of Canadistan, so.
Canadistan. That's a good one viewer.
I mean, we've got 5 people watching us now, so maybe they'll watch me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so shall we jump into the nuts and bolts of it?
Nuts and bolts away.
Okay, so currently what we've got is we've got a landing page, woohoo. We've got a login page, also woohoo. We've got a dashboard. The dashboard allows you to create a new project. We've got an empty state there, so that looks nice and pretty. Create a project, and that's kind of what we've so the real deal is like when you go to create a new project, typically you give it a name, right? Or you fill in a couple settings or something like that. Well, there may be additional settings that we could fill in at some point, but right now it's just a name. However, once it generates, or once you generate that project and give it a name, and then it gives you a command to run from your application. Once you run that application, that code in your application, what it does is it sends a payload in, and it will then rename that project to whatever your app name env is set to, or actually, I guess it's your config app.name, right? Yeah. Which could be a little bit confusing because if you just created one called, Jake's test app, and then you run this command, it could then come in as, jake.laravel.com or something like that. You know what I mean? It's just unexpected. Yeah. It's sort of like, it's a little bit jarring. So I think we have a couple options. I think either we stop renaming it and just let them name it, which honestly I'd be quite okay with. I think that might be the ticket because it's very possible that they would want to name it something other than what the name of the application is. That's possible.
Yeah.
And I think I'd rather have them have the most control. So there is a general rule that we try and follow with like specifically our data entry people at our job. And the rule that we have is we will do as much magic as we can on the front end to present them with a very intelligent form that has done as much work as we can do behind the scenes. But after we've done that, we touch nothing afterwards. If they ever edit anything in the form, they are the boss. They are the final say. They are the source of truth. So if you ever put something in, we should never change it out from underneath them is basically the rule that we use. And because I think it's just, otherwise it's very, they just never know if they can trust the system or not. It's like, well, I put this in, but I don't know if it's going to stay that. So it's like, I'm not sure. So we can either, so I think we have two options. We can either stop doing that where we rename the app to be what the app name variable is, which would be my vote. Or when they create a new project, we don't ask them to name it. We just ask them to run a command. And then when they run the command, it names it. So I think those are the two options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it, the way that it's set up at the moment, it kind of has to be something in between the two.
Okay.
Because you need to create the project within the app.
Right. So it's kind of like waiting for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
in order to generate the UUID. I mean, what we could do is, when you hit create project, it just gives you a skeleton project that says the UID, which we use for the setup. And then it doesn't prompt you for a name or anything like that. It just creates a new project and gives you the command to run. And then when you do that, it'll do the rest for you. So it'll go and set the name and all of that kind of stuff. And if you want to change it after, then you can change it and we won't make any modifications to it at all. And I think that kind of hits the balance between the two options where we need to know about it before they can set it up on their end.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I'm trying to think about. So you're basically advocating that we just do the second option, which is they create a project, we give them the code, and then when they run it, it creates the project for them with the name of that whatever's in the app dot. Whatever. And then if they want to modify it after the fact, they can, and we won't change it after that. But you're saying Correct. The initial payload that comes in, we should name it whatever the name of the app is.
Yeah, just to give them some indication that it's actually working as they would expect it to be.
You're saying that I guess if it pinged in, the very first thing it should do is, it's going to set it up with, is there any other way to indicate to them that it's working without renaming the project? Like, so what else happens at the time where we set the project up and run that initial thing? Anything? Does anything happen? Or are we literally just...
Well, we take a list of all the scheduled tasks and then pre-populate
push them in?
So, that's the other thing. We could conceivably just not update the project name. That's, neither here nor there. That's just part of the model update or the model create when they set it up.
Yeah, we could probably on our end too say like, create the name when you first set the project up, because it's like, okay, I'm setting up a project. How do I do this? Like you at least have a field to fill in so they feel like I'm doing something. I'm setting up the project, name it, enter. And then, I suppose what we could do, that's kind of what I think. Like if we're going to populate the tasks, I guess I think that if they're going to create a project, allow them to do something to create the project. And then, I don't know, man, I guess it could go either way. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care.
I'll just flip a coin and do whatever the coin says. It's the easiest way.
That'll work. Okay. So that's the first part. So you create the project by running this, you click in in our dashboard and you create the new project. Then you run this thing in your command line and it will pull in all the scheduled tasks that you currently have listed in there. Both tasks, commands, and closures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then we'll kind of figure out using the mutex, which we have in there, that will kind of, I think it also contains the current timing of the task, right? How often it's going to check in. Yep. So we'll know that as well. So we'll list that all out for your project. So you don't have to do anything. It'll just say, here they all are. Here you go. Approve, disapprove, watch, stop watching, right? We'll have a little eyeball next to them like, oh yeah, we watch this one sometimes, but don't do that one because that one's a little bit finicky or something, right? I don't know. Okay. So then the structure that we kind of have around how this works, the hierarchy is we have obviously a user, and this could change in the future based on like teams or however we want to do that. But typically we'll say a user, which has multiple projects. Projects have multiple tasks that they monitor, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the correct word for it is task. I can't think of anything else that we would use for it. So like task. Each task then, and this is where we're a little bit fuzzy what we're talking about tonight. Each task has executions. So executions is a task that ran
essentially.
Yeah. So like it ran and here is the execution details. And then each execution will have multiple pings. So the initial ping in will create the execution on our side, and it will also have a recorded ping so we know when it started. And then our task, scheduled task ended or whatever, we'll have a ping in, and that will close the loop on that execution. So we'll know, hey, we got it. It worked. And then the other thing that we could do in that, so there's a couple little things to talk about with that, but that's the general idea is that you have a begin, you have an end that will generate an execution. The execution will keep track of, hey, how long did this execution take to run? What task does it belong to? Is there anything else that we need to know that we could intelligently infer from those pings that we got, right? Is like, I'm not even sure how much information you get from the system. Like, I don't know if you could talk about like resources or anything like that. If it talks about how much memory it used, that might be interesting. But
yeah, we can add those kinds of things in. I don't think it's too hard because we can hook into that stuff from within the event, either side of the execution of the task. Because the way that the task scheduler runs is it fires them off sequentially. So,
all right. So 3 questions. Here they are. Are you ready? And the bummer part about this is I felt like we had this solved. The particular problem I'm going to talk about, but we don't. So here is the problem. First problem is that I have to get Notion open so I can talk about this. Okay. First problem is, what about skipped tasks? Right. Do we put that in an execution? I'm going to list them all out here, my problems. Okay, what about skip tasks? What if we have a finished ping, but no start, right? And then what if we have a start with no end? Okay, so let's start with the skipped executions. So tell me when that would happen.
The only time that a skipped execution will happen the way that it's been set up based on the events that fire in the event scheduler is when the truth constraint. So if you're using a scheduled task with a when method chained onto it, If that evaluates to false, then we will receive a scheduled task skipped event. Now, that's not an error condition. That's, you maybe only want to run this task at a certain time, or if there's, it's a new order report, but it only sends the new order report if there are new orders since the last time it ran. So you could have a truth constraint in that. That's not an indication that the task failed to run. It's an indication that the business logic for the task dictated that it didn't need to run. And so because
I think it is technically an execution though, because the task gets executed. Like the scheduler actually looks at it, because when we do this, the payload that's coming in includes the next run at time, right? Mm-hmm. So we update the task to say, here's the next run at time, and it should be running at this period, right? Mm-hmm. And so if it's like daily, if your thing says check new orders daily when, right? Daily is when it's supposed to run. Yes. And if it's not running daily, that's a problem, because you have to, it still should be checking it daily and then executing that when condition. But if it's not checking that every day, then that's problematic, right? So if you said every 10 minutes when, or every 5 minutes when, or whatever, right? You still have to run it, that first portion. You still have to run it that frequently, and then the when just tells you whether it was actually executed or not. So I still think executed is a good word for it.
I'm not. Yeah, I mean, because the task itself, if you're scheduling a command, the command never runs if the truth constraint doesn't pass.
Yeah, that's true.
The closure doesn't run so this is kind of gatekeeping the actual execution, and we would still know that the task ran on its regular interval. We just know that it didn't actually have to do anything, and we can report that in the UI. That's like it was skipped. We just had the status of the task to skipped.
It's almost like so. Yeah, so it's almost like instead of execution is the word a check-in, and then you have in the check-in whether the task was executed or whether the task was skipped.
And that makes it easy, because you could, whether you call it an execution or a check-in, you could just put a flag on there that says that it was skipped. It's just a Boolean is skipped kind of thing. And if it was skipped, then you've still got the record of the execution there. You can see that it was skipped. And then, because we wanted to talk about doing some metrics later on, we just need to make sure that in calculating average run times and things like that, that we don't include the skipped ones, because that'll skew the statistics. Because if your task normally takes, 60 seconds to run, but it was skipped, so that only takes, a hundredth of a second, or 100 milliseconds or whatever, it's going to skew that. It's going to bring that average runtime down, and that could trigger an alert later on in the future when we add that kind of functionality in.
I think execution is the right word, because here's why. If you have an execution, you have the status was like execution ran or finished, or execution errored, or execution, failed to start, or execution was skipped. Like that makes sense. Like execution was skipped. That's fine. Like oh my gosh. Hi, Taylor. For those of you who are listening, Michael just held up a Taylor Otwell bobblehead to the camera. That's what's going on there. Okay. So I think it makes sense to say execution was skipped. I don't think that's confusing at all.
Yeah.
The only thing is it's going to be filling up your logs, I guess. I mean, you wouldn't get an alert as this thing. I'm okay with having the information there that it skipped, ran.
I wouldn't. Yeah, because it's still saying that the task checked in when it was supposed to. It's saying that you have said that it should be skipped, and we have logged that it has skipped. And therefore, we don't have to worry about that functionality. So, I think that probably clears that up. So you'll put that in an issue somewhere.
I will write that down right now. Let me see.
Because from you. That's just adding another column into a table and just flagging it. Because we get the event, all we have to do is send that in the payload, which we're already doing, and then it just means handling that specific scenario that, hey, it ran, that we still need to create the execution record, and that the execution record should be marked as skipped. And
I technically think, I actually think that instead of this being a was skipped column, I think it needs to be a status column. And there's going to be a couple statuses that we might have there. So on an execution. So add a column of status. So here they are. What are the different types of statuses we could have? We could say skipped. What else would you have? I can think of some, but let's started.
Finished.
Okay. Finished. Errored. Not completed. This brings us into our next question.
Yeah, but yeah. Yep.
Right. Skipped. Started. Finished. Errored. Not completed. Not started. I mean, like, you could. I
don't know.
Not completed is weird.
Incomplete
or
means
not started as
finish. Incomplete means we didn't get a finish. I don't think we would ever know that there's an error, because the error there would be an exception. It would have been swallowed by Laravel, and we never would have got the finish event. So we would just say that task never finished, that it timed out or whatever, and that
so we'll call it incomplete.
Task is now in a thing, or delayed. Andreas on Twitter suggests delayed. On Periscope suggests that delayed.
Interesting. Delayed. Let's talk about that.
But would delayed be a delayed start? And that would be the task that is delayed. But the execution is, incomplete.
So I don't. Okay. So you've got, yeah. Okay. So here's kind of like this delayed thing. We should talk about this. Okay. I'm going to make a new thing here for delayed. All right. And we actually have considered this. So with delayed, we actually have this idea of grace periods. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you have a task that's supposed to start at 9:00, we will give it until 9:01 to check in.
Yeah.
Right. So that initial ping start, it will have until 9:01 to start. If it doesn't start by 9:01, we'll alert you. So you have like a 1-minute grace period. That's not configurable, but it could be. Perfect for instance here. This happens on our app all the time that we built for this. It's set to run at 9:00. Freaking no exception, right? If you have more than one job queued up to run, like for that particular exact time, and we've had this. We had a long running job that was running. It doesn't go until the first one's done.
Correct. Yeah.
So like if you have a long running job, like it's like too bad, so sad. And what that might mean is you might need to schedule it for another time, possibly. If you have a really, really long running job that's sitting out there and, hogging all of your ability to do that. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we have this grace period of like 1 minute. So it has a minute to check in. With finishing, I think the what we said was we look at how often it runs, and if it has not, so we either say it has like an extra 3 minutes or something like that, or half the time between when it's supposed to run and when it's like, so for example, like if it's every minute, you have an extra 30 seconds after. You know what I mean? That if it doesn't like finish or something like that, if it doesn't finish in a minute and a half or something like that, then we consider it like either delayed or incomplete.
Yeah.
Right.
I think
so. Like we have to
delay. I think delay on the task is good. If you miss that 60-second grace period, that first 60-second grace period, I think we can say straight away that the task is delayed.
The task is delayed, not the execution, but the task itself.
Yeah, the task has been delayed from when it should be running.
And okay, so we're talking about two different things here.
But if we don't see that task check-in in another interval of the grace period, then we say it's late. Then we say it's like skipped or it's missing or whatever. And then that should then trigger an alert, which should trigger you to go and look at why it's been delayed. Is it not running? Is it being held up by something else? Whatever.
Okay. Yeah. So like, okay. So with tasks, we have like tasks are like, just under project level. So tasks we have like healthy, late or missing, and then we have delayed essentially. Mm-hmm. Right. And healthy kind of comes first, and then we have delayed, and then we have late or missing. Right. Is the idea.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, but like, okay. So, for example, then, and we're talking about like we have this delayed idea, whatever. So we've already said with an execution, we have this skipped, which is what we talked about, which is it's intentionally skipped, right? Mm-hmm.
That's still a healthy task, in my opinion.
Yes, it is. It is, absolutely. Yep. Okay. And then so we would have to have, in addition to that, the answer to these questions. What if we have a start with no end? So that's what we're talking about with the execution, right? So yes, I get a task is delayed, fine, whatever. If you have an execution that starts and never finishes, at some point you have to call it on that execution. Because here's the deal. It may start and 20 minutes later it checks in. Right? It finally comes back. It was a really long running job. It actually ran way longer than what it was supposed to run. But it comes back and checks in 20 minutes. Do you just, you know what I mean? At what point do you have to update the status of that execution to say, hey, listen, like this started a long time ago. We're going to say that this never completed. We're going to let you know that this execution that was started at this time was running and either still running or whatever, but for right now, we're going to call it incomplete.
I think if we have a subsequent start before we have a finish, then we can say that's an error. That's an error.
No, but how about this? Like, how about your daily task? You can then you'd have to wait a day before you knew that task was late or missing. Like you've got to, you've got to at some point say like, we're going to give this job this much time to run. And now some of this might be, initially you don't do this until you have some data gathered. And so it could be you let the task run 10 times before you start doing these automatic failure of tasks. So like you have some data around how this is working, right? It typically takes around 10 minutes to run, between 10 and 15 minutes. After we know that, then we can say, okay, if we've got at least 10 executions for this that have run successfully, get an average for how long this execution takes to run. And if it's more than 20% over the amount of time it typically takes to run, mark it as delayed. If it's more than 40% over, mark it as failed or incomplete or something, right? That's a lot of thinking around that, but like that's the only thing I've really been able to come up with as far as how we would handle that. And apologies, I'm not in any of these chat things that are going on right now if people are talking, so you're going to have to convey that.
Yeah. So Andreas can we get the job timeout maybe? Like, can you set the timeout on a job when you schedule?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Can we get that? I mean, that works if you've got a scheduled job. I don't know how that works with like scheduled commands and closures and things like that. So that bears some further investigation. I think typically what I've seen in other places is they just set some defaults. Like this task should finish in 5 minutes. And if it doesn't, then we can start raising alarms. And if that doesn't suit individual cases, like if you have that task that's going to take 20 minutes to run, then you can go into the UI and you can change that. You can say, all right, this is going to take 20 minutes to run. Alert me if it hasn't finished in 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And then we can do it based on that. So once we get the start, if we don't have a finish event by, start plus runtime allowance or whatever we call it, then we start flinging poo and saying stuff's not working.
Yeah. Okay. So summarize here. All right. Here's what I've got, right? We have, as far as an execution goes, we have a started, we have a finished, we have a skipped. And then what we're talking about right now is either incomplete, or errored, whatever we want to call it. I think either of those would be appropriate, right? Like if we won't know ever for sure that it was errored, but we will probably have a check in and not a check out, right? Or check in and not, or start and not a finish,
start, not
right?
Finish, yeah.
Okay, so we could determine what we want to call that, incomplete or error. I don't know. Probably incomplete.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, all right. So then how do we know if it's incomplete? If we have a start and not a finish, then we have some options. We either get the timeout, but I feel like there is no timeout for the CLI. Like, is there? Like on the command line? Like, because like that's the whole point of running it on the command line is like command line typically. I know you can have like long running jobs like on the queue, but like for scheduler, I don't know there is really. I think you can run a command line, I think, for as long as you really want. Like if you think about like for, if you have to like send a crap ton of emails, like running it on the command line means you can run it for as long as you want. Like doesn't matter. Let it run for 3 days. I don't care.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can either say
that case.
Yeah, so we can either say set a default, or we can say figure out how long it will take based on previous runs, or we can let the user put it in for all of them that they care about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that's gonna be the trick, right? The other thing that you could possibly do is this is kind of what we're doing with ours is we just do, and this is kind of the whole name of the Laravel side of things. Then ping only happens after it finishes, right?
Yes.
This entire problem is caused by sending a ping event when you start the task, right? And it's like, yes, that's good for informational purposes, but we really don't care unless it finishes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like
we're trying to figure out. But we're trying to figure out like what constitutes a failed task. At what point does the task need to be flagged as missing, late, delayed, failed, whatever?
Because they're actually like the same thing. Yeah, they actually are the same thing. This is interesting. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Because you can't so this is the same problem you have, which is like
okay,
let's hear it.
We need machine learning.
Oh, that's it. AI. Let's do it that way.
Like,
AI.
It sounds gimmicky, but I think this kind of thing where we're trying to make decisions, but the thing is, we don't want to make those kind of decisions on behalf of users without them opting in. Maybe.
Sure.
Or is the scenario here that we will do it for you and you don't have to worry about it, and we'll figure out what a suitable timeout is based on an average of your last. It doesn't work if you're doing monthly tasks because it's going to be a month. It's going to be the better part of a year before we figure out, based on the last 10 executions, what a suitable timeout value is. So I think we definitely need to have a default. And from what I've seen in a couple of other solutions out there is they set it to 5 minutes and 10 minutes.
I think that's fair because
and 10 is the bailout kind of condition.
So what that pretty much means then is that the grace period for any job, any task is a 5-minute grace period. That's what that means, right? Because you're never going to get that finished event if you have a job that's over 5 minutes. It's going to fail every single time. It's going to be throwing an alert to you saying, hey, by the way, this is not working correctly.
What if we decide that it's failed based on that timeout and then we get a finish event after?
Yeah, I mean, so then you'd have to update the
so we're happy because then we update the task to say, okay, it is actually successful, it's no longer in an errored state. We update the execution to say that it finished because it's no longer in a missing state or an incomplete state. So I think the defaults, 5 minutes, it's running slow. 10 minutes, it's cacked it. And then if the user decides, no, my application takes 20 minutes to run that task. So tell me in 25 minutes if it hasn't finished, and in 30 minutes, just fail it. And that way, we can make some sensible defaults from that scenario. And then, you just hold the user's hand. Hey, if you need to change these, go here, click here, change that value, done.
I'd almost say we just say 5 minutes by default. Like every job, it has 5 minutes. And if it's late by 5 minutes, meaning it hasn't finished a check-in for that one, then it's in an error state. Mm-hmm. And then when that happens, when they get that alert saying, hey, by the way, this task never finished checking in, at that point we can present them with a screen saying, hey, is this a long-running task? Is it possible this is a long-running task? Like you can increase the amount of time that you want to wait for this job in particular. By default, across the entire application, we will use a 5-minute timeout by default. You can decrease it if you want to. If you know if this job is critical and it has to run every minute, then sure, go ahead and decrease the limit to say you have 1 minute to check in, 1 minute of grace to check in. But if it's a typical one and it doesn't matter if you wait 5 minutes, then we'll say 5 minutes is the default, but you can increase it or decrease it based on a job specific basis.
And those email alerts that go to the user should include deep links to if you if is this a long running task? Is this timeout not suitable? Click here and then it just take them straight to the task settings page and say, here you go, change it to whatever you need it to be. We'll respect that in future.
Yeah. So we can increase it for long running jobs. Yeah.
And then as we go along and we gain some more metrics around individual task executions and we can see averages and things like that, then, we could potentially make suggestions to the user that, hey, you've got this set to 5 minutes, but it's typically taking 8 minutes to run. Maybe you want to increase the timeout to whatever that is, plus 5%. So 8 plus 5%, whatever 5% of 8 minutes is.
Sure. Yeah.
Probably not enough.
Yeah, you could almost, like if you wanted to, you could almost... you could say, hey, we have 2 modes. I mean, this is probably down the road, but you could have a default mode, which just says like, hey, we'll just set it for 5 minutes and then you can fine tune it as jobs fail or as whatever. Or you can do it as in like a learning mode. Like you can put it into learning mode and we'll put it into learning mode for a week. And then after a week with all the data we've gathered, we'll set what we think should be reasonable defaults for your timeouts on your jobs.
Yeah.
You could do that too.
Yep.
That's probably down the road for sure.
Yeah.
But okay, I think that helps me with. I think the thing that I'm basically thinking about now is it's helpful to have those ping-ins at the beginning, but they really mean nothing. I mean, they help you get metrics. They help you get metrics, and they help you know if your scheduler is running.
Yeah.
But they mean nothing as far as the tasks themselves.
How many times have you deployed an application to production and realized some days later that the scheduler wasn't running at all?
Yes. Yes, I have had that happen.
So it's good to have that. So yeah. It's interesting. So it's good that it's out there, but people are asking. Andreas is asking, wasn't the beta for this going to be in November? And luckily,
Andreas,
luckily we were smart.
Easy.
And we didn't put a year on there. So
is this Andreas Hubenthal?
No. Andreas Santabanez.
Oh, Santabanez. Hola, Andreas. Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
But yeah, it's good. I'm glad we had this conversation because that brings me some clarity. I started thinking about it over Christmas, and then I ran out of Christmas to work on it, and it's now, a week into February. I did speak to Yaz about this probably about a month ago, and he came up with the process ID thing. So
yeah, which I think is really smart. Yeah, good job, Yaz.
He's certainly made that a little bit easier. His royalty checks in the mail, and he gets
every subscriber, every ping.
He gets 30% of every paying subscriber at the time that he solved that for us. So,
oh my,
30% of nothing.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Okay, I thought you meant a future. I got it. No. I got it.
No, yeah. We'll have to get him something. We'll send him some things. Speaking of things that we will be sending people.
And speaking of startups that are self-funded.
That was a great
Fathom
segue.
Analytics.
Fathom
that was a great
Analytics,
segue.
Our friends at Fathom Analytics that bring us simple analytics for bloggers and businesses. If you're sick of scrolling through pages and pages and pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of reports and collecting gobs of personal data about your visitors, which you really don't need or care about or want, Fathom is a simple and private website analytics platform that lets you focus on what's important, and that is your business. You get one screen of data in real time. There is no cookie notices required because they don't collect any personal or invasive data about your users, and there are no cookies used, so don't worry about that junk. You can have unlimited websites. You can have an application that is instantly ready for huge spikes because we know so many of our friends hit the front page of Hacker News all the time.
All the time.
Fathom has been featured on Fast Company, GitHub, Product Hunt, Hacker News for being a simple and easy to use alternative to Google Analytics, and the wonderful, wonderful people that are using it speak volumes of it. They've also got their own weekly podcast called Above Board, discussing privacy and business in the digital age. And as a simple and powerful analytics platform built on top of Laravel and on Laravel Vapor. It's a pretty simple pricing structure. Pricing starts at $14 a month for 100,000 page views, and you are free to cancel at any time. and all the pricing plans start with a free trial. But if you head over to usefathom.com/north, you can get, what is it, $10 off?
$10 off your first month. Yeah. So it'll be $5.
There you
go. It's worth a try for sure. Yeah, I want to say a couple other things too. So like DHH said this yesterday. The great thing about making products is that you get to express your bitterness in the material of change. He's being extremely bitter about mass invasion of privacy, and being able to express that sentiment in specific features like tracking pixels is what he lives for. And so somebody asked after that, what would you recommend for analytics? And he said, I heard some good things about UseFathom. So the word is spreading quickly. DHH is recommending UseFathom. You heard it here first. So these guys have put an enormous amount of work into this, and they are Laravel community members. So Jack Ellis and Paul Jarvis, it's just super polished and it looks really good. So definitely do them a favor, do us a favor. usefathom.com/north. Even if you just check it out, we would really, really appreciate it. Give those guys some love. Shout them out on Twitter. Retweet something of theirs. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't forget also, while we're talking about our wonderful community members, Jack Ellis has been spreading lots and lots of hot tips. Get onto his email list at jackellisweb.com, I think. He's got serverlesslaravel.com is his upcoming course on using Laravel Vapor. He's gone into a lot of detail about costing and where Vapor can save you. They were spending, around $500 to $800 a month on hosting costs on their. I think they were on Heroku before they moved to Laravel Vapor. So I think in the last 2 years or so, they've rewritten Fathom a couple of times from scratch. So
really, seriously, that's hilarious.
Yeah. I think it was written in a whole other language initially, V1, and V2 is a Laravel application. And then just as they finished, just as they were getting ready to investigate moving their platform, that was around the time that Taylor launched Vapor. So yeah, definitely check Fathom out. Give Paul Jarvis and Jack Ellis a follow on Twitter as well. We will have links to all those things in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Do we have anything else to talk about with Then Ping Me? I think that's honestly. I think that's quite a while. I will say this: we will be using the, if not state machines, which we will probably, but the state pattern. And this is something that we just implemented again the other day. Wilbur Powery, who I work with, who's one of our developers. We just used this again the other day. And it's nice because it really, what it does is it allows you to co-locate all the stuff that happens at the same time when you are updating the state of a model or of an entity. So some people would say, okay, well, I just emit an event and then all the things happen. And that does work. That's great. For me, the problem has always been with that. Like when you emit that event, then it's like, okay, where's that getting handled, right?
Yeah.
Typically, that's like the event service provider. You have to go in there, and then you have a mapping of like one to the others, and then you have to go see all the other jobs that are happening in there, and then you kind of can dig into those, whatever. If they have codependent pieces, then you'd have to make sure that they ran like sequential or something. I don't know. Like it's just a little bit. It can be a little bit finicky, right?
Yeah.
So with this, what we're doing instead is we just have these states and these transitions, and when the transition occurs, it just says handle. We have it's like a handle method, and then any of the things that need to happen just happen. So in the controller itself, all we have to do is we say model arrow transition to, and then the name of the next state, and there you go. That's it. Now, if you want to see all the things that happen, you just go click into that one specific state or into that transition, and it will show you all the things that happen. Now, there's also this idea of like state charts. This is really cool. This is like a formalized version of state machines, and they have like conditionals that can prevent this transition from happening, or things that happen on the coming in of the transition, or things that happen on the going out of the transition. There's a bunch of really interesting things. We're using for that. We have one that's a home rolled version, and then we have another one that's written by one of the guys over at Spatie. So. Well, we're going to mess with that in this project. I'm going to convert Michael over to it, and I think he's really going to like it. It's going to be awesome. It works really well.
I'm ready to go.
All right.
I've got status columns ready for your action.
Yes, man, they're awesome. And the nice thing about it is like you can trust it.
Mm.
Because like when status columns are just like set all like willy nilly, you don't know where they're being set at.
Yeah.
That's when it gets really nerve wracking about the status. Like, oh man, like can I trust that? Like, did it somehow get updated out from underneath me? Like, that's when you want to look at timestamps.
Yeah.
The problem with timestamps is like it's so freaking difficult to query because you have this computed state, this computed status now, where you say like, okay, well, it was checked in here, like last checked in at, but the last run at is this, and the last skipped at, and like we errored at, like I don't know. There's just all these different timestamps, and you have to compute the status based on those, and you can't query that. I mean, you could, but it's very difficult, right? So a lot of times, what you end up with is you end up with this like attribute on your model that takes into account all these different timestamps and then returns you a status. It's a mess. It's very difficult. So this specific project is going to be, it has the exact use cases we would need for these particular types of solutions. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
And I hear all you other people out there saying event sourcing. I hear you. We're basically rolling event sourcing here. This is what we're doing.
I kind of sidestepped using the state machines in a project. I had to track recently for user referrals when a user signed up, when they were connected, when they paid their first bill, when they qualified, and when they were qualified, and when the referral was paid out. So there were 5 different states, and I didn't use state machines. And I know that you're very upset about that, but I did write.
You did. You just didn't. You didn't make them explicit.
But
you just used them implicit.
So I like there's like transitioning between states, and it's all system based. There's no way you can go and update a column in the table. We stored dates when the user was connected, when they were qualified, like when all of those different state changes happened. But in terms of the actual state column, that only gets updated in one way, and not
genius.
Not through a specific piece of functionality that says, model transition to blah, but it was an event was fired. There was a listener that said, hey, I need to do something. The invoice was paid. Is this part of a referral? If it is, if it isn't, get out of here. If it is, go and do the next thing, set the status and move to the next state. So I kind of did it in a roundabout way, but I got there.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what we've done in other projects. And I think, so the state pattern is not necessarily state machines. It's just like, it's a very, I think it's like one of the gang of 5 like patterns, like the state pattern. But it really does just help clarify. It's like, oh, I remember the first time we saw that, I was like, oh yeah, actually that makes perfect sense. Why don't we just do that? And so basically, so here's kind of a really, really short version for you. So when you have, whatever your status is, you basically have a class associated with that status, right? So like if you're in a referred status, you would call model state, and it hydrates that status. So you have this new class that's like attached to that. So you have your state. And then all you do is just say like transition to, and then whatever you want to go to next. And that class would actually check for you and say, am I allowed to do that? Do I actually have the ability to do that? And in our case, what we did just was really simple. We just put public methods on that class, called whatever the next things we wanted the transition to were. So like, that's it. And then you just call that method and you're done. If the method doesn't exist, then it throws an error. No problem. Super simple. It's really, really simple.
Nice.
Yeah. Hey man, it's getting a little long in the tooth here. We are at 53 minutes. We should probably wrap this thing.
We probably should.
Okay. Hey everybody, thanks so much. Go ahead.
Good chat. It got me in a good headspace for next steps in terms of what we need to achieve to hopefully start getting, we've got a whole bunch of people on the early access list, so we can probably finish writing the first version of this, get it all working. You can test it out. I can test it out in our own apps at work, see how it's going.
Yes.
And then we could probably start letting in a handful of people just to start playing around with it for freeze, for $0. And then once we've tested that out for a little bit, then we can start going to the next step, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to do this. Like we said, even if we only are the only ones who are using it for us, I think it'll be great.
100%.
So,
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Last thing with that, like on that specific note right there. Part part of the thing that's cool about writing it for yourself, and we did this with our own, there are a million things that will handle payment for you out there, right? So like in our particular space, there are probably 5 vendors that have solutions for our particular situation. The problem is they're all like a cheap suit, right? Like they're pre-made, prefab, and they have to fit 5 different sizes, right? They have to fit like different types of businesses. So it's like going to, no hate on like anybody who does this, right? But it's like going to like JCPenney or whatever your equivalent is, some department store, just buying a suit off the rack, and then that's it. Versus going and buying a suit and then getting it tailored, right? Like that's the difference between like buying a pre-made solution and building your own, is that you can make it fit the contours of your business exactly. Yeah. And you don't have to wait for them to implement some possible feature that you could really use. That's been a huge godsend for us with this project we built called WilburPay, because we can do whatever we want, anything we want. The very, very nitty gritty specifics of our business, we can build it straight to spec. Yeah. And so I'm excited about this because there are a million other solutions out there, but some of them are, it's generic. They can be generic. And I mean, this will be generic-ish, right? But for us in particular, we will have different problems than maybe what other people do. And since we're the ones building it, we can build those features in.
You just have to be careful. I suppose it's lucky that you work with so many lawyers, because they can figure out all the compliance around taking payments and all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to worry about it as much, as opposed to, like just someone on the street building an app and deciding they're going to build their own version of Stripe for some reason because they don't want to pay the 30 cents to Stripe.
Totally. Yeah, it's awesome. We actually have a guy whose only job at our company is he is the chief compliance officer. He's a lawyer, and he just keeps track of compliance stuff. So every morning in the morning manager meeting, he will be like, yeah, there was 3 new cases about this, and there was a judgment out in California with this new law that's going on, and somebody got sued about texting somebody, and we need to be aware of whatever, and there's this wording that we can't use anymore, or it's all sorts of crazy stuff. He keeps track of all that. So before we do anything, we're always like, hey Mark, what do you think about this? And he'll be like, oh yeah, we can't do that, or no, that looks great. He's awesome. So
awesome.
Anyway. All right. Thanks, everybody. This was episode 69. Thanks for tuning in with us either via live feed or via your podcatcher of choice. If you like the show, please feel free to rate it up. 5 stars is always appreciated. Hit us up with questions on Twitter at Michael Dorinda, at Jacob Bennett, or at North South Audio. And you can find show notes for this episode at northmeetssouth.audio/69.
Beautiful. Thanks.
All right. And thanks again to Fathom.
Friends, Fathom Analytics. Check them out at usefathom.com/north.
And last one, apology. If my mic is cutting in left and right, sorry, I had to use my old mic tonight because my poor wife is sick on her birthday. Oh my word. Sorry, Lo. And she is sleeping in the room that I usually record in. So big bummer.
The downsides of having a birthday in the middle of winter.
Yes, true story. True story. All right, everybody. Till next time.
Bye.
Peace.